What is happening, everybody? It's Greg here from Stochastic and joined by a guest here. Well, on my YouTube channel, it's a guest, but I'm the guest on Brady's YouTube channel. So, got Brady here from DFS by the numbers and trying out a collab here. And I think this is going to go really well. I really like Brady's content. So, if you guys could do us a favor here and support both our channels, like the video, subscribe to the Stochastic channel, subscribe to the DFS by the numbers channel, and hopefully you guys support it. And we decide this piece of content we're going to continue to do. So, what we're going to be doing here is a little bit of a DFS overview, looking at the main event, as well as some other options that we like for the slate. But first, what's happening, Brady?
What's up, man? Feeling pretty good about this card. First pay-per-view of 2024, and I'm looking forward to the main event, especially Sean Strickland, Dricus du Plessis. Looks like there's some bad blood between the two, but yeah, I think it's a really good card overall. I think it's a great card from a DFS perspective, so can't wait to break it down with you.
Yeah, and then also just really quick for people who are not familiar with you on my channel, and then I'll do the same in inverse afterwards. What can people expect from your channel and your site, DFS by the numbers?
Well, just nonstop content. I think I'm putting out like a new video every single day, and been doing it for I think like going on 7 years now. Just a ton of content week in and week out, and yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and the big thing that we have over at Stochastic this year for MMA in 2024 is we do have sims for MMA now, which is why I'm really trying to get more MMA content and reaching out to people like Brady, who I really did want to work with. So going to be having MMA sims. I'm going to be doing a video for that on Friday, full slate breakdown. And what you're going to get from our sims is there's a contest generator, so you could build up to 10,000 lineups in it, and then you could simulate the slate 40,000 times. So all the fighters, all the fights going to be simulated 40,000 times to help you identify which of your lineups are the best. I used it for the first time last week and came in first in the $3, which made me pretty confident that it's a really good tool and want to talk more about it and do more content for it. So I'll look forward to that on Friday. But Brady, starting with UFC 297 and helping people build out their lineups, let's start by talking about the main event. And first off, how high of a priority is this fight for you in your lineups? And then on top of that, which side of the main event do you prefer for DFS?
Man, it's a fight that it's gonna be hard to get away from. This main event, and you look at these price tags: Sean Strickland 8,200, Dricus du Plessis 8,000. I'm probably going to be all in on this main event at these salaries, just because it's a Dricus du Plessis fight, and it's going to be an absolute car crash. This guy's had 22 fights, 22 car crashes. 21 of his 22 fights have finished inside the distance. The one that didn't was that Brad Tavares fight, where like the fight could have potentially been stopped on a couple different occasions. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a car crash one way or another. I don't have like a strong lean towards a side. I guess I do lean towards the underdog here in Dricus, 200 salary savings. Plus, I think he has the early finish upside, but I think whoever wins this fight is going to score very well. I see it kind of being Dricus potentially landing something early, maybe even getting an early submission against Strickland, or if this fight does get extended, I think it does favor Strickland. We've seen Dricus finish twice in the third round. We've never seen him go to a fourth, seen a fifth as well. So I can see whoever winning this fight put up a massive score here.
That's how I see it as well. And I also have a really difficult time picking a side for this fight. Like, I've gone back and forth. So there was a part of me too, Brady being a little bit selfish here, where I was like, well, I don't have a really strong lean. I'm going to make Brady talk about the main event first. And then maybe I could steal some of his thunder if he brings up some sort of really good point here. But I view it also as either being du Plessis early or Strickland late. I know that du Plessis, we've heard about the nose surgery he's had that's cleared up his ability to breathe through the nose. But I don't know how much that actually impacts him, because even in the Till fight, it seemed to me like he got tired pretty quickly. We've seen that pretty often from du Plessis, where it's looked like he's tired early in fights. He slows down the second round, but then he gets a second win come the third round. But Strickland's not going to let up. So I do feel a little bit better about the cardio on the Strickland side than I do on the du Plessis side. So if this fight gets extended, which I do think is the most likely outcome, I definitely favor Strickland to win in the third, fourth, and fifth round. So for DFS purposes, I'm going to lean a little bit more towards Sean Strickland. But if there's some sort of massive gap in the ownership, and as we get later on into the week, come Friday on my content, I'm going to be bringing all the updated ownership projections we have. If anybody ends up being way more popular than the other, like if du Plessis is 40% and Strickland's 30% or vice versa, I'll lean towards the guy who's lower owned. But In reality, I don't have a really strong lean. It'll be something like 60% Strickland, a 40% Duplessis in my lineups, but definitely one that I want to be playing both sides of, and I'm going to be 100% in my lineups for this weekend. Anything else you want to add about the main event, Brady?
Yeah, like I said, it's gonna be hard to get away from it this week. It's gonna be popular, obviously, but I think for a very good reason. We got 12 fights on the card. This main event, it's hard to see it going the distance. I think it's like minus 275 to finish inside the distance, and it's also, like I said, a Dricus Duplessis fight where he doesn't really go the distance ever. So yeah, Dricus early, Strickland late. Whoever wins should put up an incredible score at these price tags, especially.
And now, as far as pay up options, it's a really good mid range fight to target the Duplessis and Strickland fight. Like you said, 8,200, 8,000 is the price tag. You're just going to open up some salary savings elsewhere. Do you have a favorite pay up option on the slate?
Yeah, I think it's Mike Malott 9,300. Speaking of finishers, Mike Malott 100% finish rate in 10 of his wins. Not only that, all 10 of his wins actually come under 1.5 rounds. 9 of his 10 wins come in the first round. And the big narrative this week is we see what the UFC's doing, right? I mean, they're taking Mike Malott. We're putting him in Canada. We're giving him a top 15 guy in Neil Magny, who is now 36 years old, who's been finished a ton of times. And we're going to try to give him a showcase win here. People are very excited about Mike Malott, probably Canada's best prospect at this moment. And rightfully so, man. I mean, this is a guy that has power on the feet. He has an incredible submission game. And Magny loves to tap. I mean, this guy Magny's tapped out like 4 times in the UFC. I think like 6 times in his entire career. So I think Mike Malott has a good chance to go out there and not only win this fight, but get the fight down the mat and get a first round submission here. Yeah, should be a pretty easy fight for him. Don't want to completely count out Magny, but I mean, at the end of the day, this guy's 36 years old. He's been finished a ton, and I just think it's Mike Malott's time now. 9,300, expensive, but I love the finish upside and the grappling he brings to the table here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, Magny looked terrible in the fight against Ian Gary. Not that any of us were expecting him to win, but there's also kind of like a baseline of wash that he brought to the table where he didn't do anything in that fight other than survive. So I agree with you. I think Mike Malott is one of the top pay up options on the slate. Somebody who I'm going to go to who I think should be a little bit less owned is Jillian Robertson. And it's for 2 reasons. She doesn't have as much win equity as Mike Malott, but she brings a lot of upsides to the table, especially in the wrestling and grappling department. And she's in a matchup where she should be able to implement her game. So I've got the stats up here for Polyana Viana, who's only defending takedowns at a 43% clip. So I don't think that there's going to be too much resistance for Robertson to land takedowns. And her fights are pretty simple to break down because it's either Robertson gets takedowns, hold top position, and then is able to dominate the fights and often finish them, or she isn't able to land takedowns. She gets the crap beat out of her on the feet, and then she usually ends up quitting sometime in the second or third round. Considering the 43% takedown defense for Viana, and I do view Robertson as being the more physical of the two, I think this is going to be one of the fights where Robertson lands takedowns, and when she does, she almost always scores 95 plus fantasy points with a ceiling for like 115, 120. And also, because of the fact that it's a WMMA fight, I don't think people are going to be as willing to spend north of 9K for her. So Jillian Robertson is a pay-up option for me on this slate here, Brady. As far as Robertson goes, is she somebody you also like for this matchup?
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the lines. I think Saturday or Sunday, I saw Robertson minus 250. I'm like, what's going on? And then I looked into the fight. I'm like, man, this is a really good matchup for her. I think this is Robertson's division and the strawweight division. I think she's going to cause a lot of women some problems down here. And yeah, I think it's a terrible matchup for Viana. Viana has some of the worst takedown defense I've ever seen. She really doesn't have takedown defense. She's pulling guard. She wants to be on her back, right? And that's a no-no against Jillian Robertson, who's incredible on the ground. We've seen Viana tapped twice in the UFC. I think Robertson can get takedowns here, potential submission as well, 9,100. And yeah, I do think she'll be lower owned than Malott as well. So yeah, I like both.
Yeah, and we saw her get submitted in her last fight by Jasmine Lucindo, and I think the Robertson's a much better submission grappler than Lucindo. So
Yeah.
if this fight gets to the ground, which I think it's probably inevitably going to, it's Robertson's world from there. So let's work our way down to the mid-range. And Brady, once again, I'll let you go first with a fighter you're targeting in the mid-range. I have a very uncomfortable answer, but I'll give my reasons why after you tell me what you're targeting heavy in the mid-range.
Man, if it's uncomfortable, I think we might be thinking about the same fight, and it's Malcolm Gordon, Jimmy Flick, right? So we got Malcolm Gordon 8,300, Jimmy Flick 7,900. I think I like this fight more than the main event even. It's the first fight of the night. These are two of the most least durable fighters I've ever seen in my life, and it's a flyweight fight. So these guys have a combined 14 losses, 13 of those finish inside the distance. Malcolm Gordon, 7 finish losses, 5 by knockout, 2 by sub. Jimmy Flick's been finished 6 times by knockout. I mean, these guys are just getting finished nonstop. And it's hard to see this fight going the distance. I don't think there's a fight doesn't go line out yet, but whatever it is, it's going to be something ridiculous. You got to think. I saw like the under 2.5 was like minus 325 for a flyweight fight. It's crazy, but no, I mean these guys are both finishers. In terms of picking a side, call me crazy, but I think Jimmy Flick is very live to win this fight. He's looked terrible his last 2 fights against Charles Johnson and Alessandro Costa, but he's going against Malcolm Gordon, who's just fragile as can be. 7 finish losses, a 9% takedown defense. Flick can get takedowns easily here, and Flick's a very dangerous grappler. Both these guys are fighting for their jobs. I heard an interview with Flick. He talked about how he's on a 2-fight skid. He needs to win this fight, so I think we're going to hopefully get a more motivated version of Flick. And if so, yeah, I think he could tap out Gordon, who's been tapped out twice in the UFC. Jimmy Flick has 0 knockout wins ever, but I mean, maybe he can knock out Gordon because anybody can knock out Gordon. But I will have some Gordon as well. I think somebody's getting finished here. I think both guys have a lot of quit in them. Both guys are very, very, very not durable. So, but I do lean Flick, and I think Flick is going to be going under the radar. I think a lot of people are down on him this week. And you take a look at the Malcolm Gordon money line, like money's pouring in on him, and Malcolm Gordon's like minus 205. I don't know. I see this fight really going either way. I think both guys are untrustworthy, and give me the guy that's cheaper and probably lower owned here in Jimmy Flick.
So I can't believe we're actually on the same page with this. And I don't have a clear winner for this fight. Like, I'm not looking at this and saying that I feel confident that Jimmy Flick wins or Malcolm Gordon. I just don't agree with the line movement. I know the line movement is going to drive ownership in DFS because we got these 2 guys that are priced in the mid range. If you are just using betting lines to create your lineups or to create any sort of projections, Malcolm Gordon's the best value play on the slate by a really wide margin. You just don't see people that are 8,300 that are minus 200 favorites, especially on a card that doesn't have that many big favorites. So that probably means we're going to be looking at Gordon like 40+% owned, something around there. And then Flick on the comeback is probably going to be like 15% owned or something like that. And in a fight that, like you said, is very likely to finish inside the distance. We don't have an inside the distance line as of now, but this fight is minus 350 to be in under 2.5 rounds. It's right around minus 125 to minus 140. It's line for under 1.5 rounds. So it's a fight with a lot of finishing equity. And I view it as being close to a coin flip matchup, whereas the market is looking at Malcolm Gordon as a big favorite, which I don't agree with. Something else too. I don't know if you noticed this, Brady. The takedown, this has to be a record. Malcolm Gordon has a 9% takedown defense. Jimmy Flick is 0%. He's never successfully defended a takedown. This fight literally might be as easy as who shoots for a takedown first ends up winning. I've never seen takedown defense this poor on both sides.
It's crazy, man. Like if you want to take these guys down, you can. So, man, this is an incredible fight, I think.
Yeah, Jimmy Flick, if you do look at the numbers, he is a little bit more hittable. He does absorb 5.05 significant strikes per minute. And I do think Malcolm Gordon is the better athlete of the two, while Flick I view as probably being stronger and a little bit more physical. This is a coin flip matchup. This is, to me, one of the more bizarre line movements that I've seen in recent memory, because I just can't believe that Malcolm Gordon is nearly minus 200 favorite in 2024. Neither of these guys are UFC caliber fighters. So give me the lower owned guy in Jimmy Flick in a fight that's going to have a lot of finishing potential. Finally, Brady, this is a card where it is fairly difficult to find salary savings. A lot of not massive favorites, but solid favorites that I do think in general are fairly lined. But are there any punt plays that you do find standing out to you for this slate?
Yeah, last week I think there were a couple more pump plays that stuck out, like Nicholas Moto. I was an obvious one, and he came through. This week is a little bit tougher, I think, because I really don't like a lot of these guys down low. Like I don't like Neil Magny. I don't really like Polyana Viana. But one guy that does stick out, and I kind of see it being a lot closer than these salaries do indicate, and that's Ramon Tavares, 7,300. The reason being is, City did knock out Tavares, in their first fight on the Contender Series. But you go back and watch that fight, it was literally the worst stoppage I think I've ever seen in my life, where City dropped him and then the ref stopped the fight like instantly. It was a terrible stoppage, hence why they're getting a rematch here. But up until then, that was a very competitive fight. I think it was like 11-11 in terms of the strike totals. Tavares is looking good, and this guy Tavares has a ton of power for the bantamweight division. You go to his Instagram, I think he says he has like a 9-2 knockdown ratio, which I think it could be even more than that, because in his last fight, he sat down that Ramias guy like 3 times. They officially credit him with only 1 knockdown, but this guy Tavares has incredible power for the bantamweight division. So I think someone's probably going to get knocked out in this one as well. But like I said, I think it's going to play out a lot closer than these salaries do indicate. You're getting somebody in Tavares who has incredible power for a bantamweight. I don't hate it at 7,300. That's really one of the only things that I like this week down low. It's kind of tough this down low. I'm curious to your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. And also, I was just pulling some of the stats up on the screen while you were talking there. And we didn't really see much data on that fight the first time they fought. It was a 2-minute fight, and they each landed 11 significant strikes. So it did play out pretty competitively before there was the finish that happened. And it was a really shitty finish because, like you said, Kevin McDonald, terrible stoppage. Probably the second worst stoppage of his career, because he was also responsible for the Ankalaev Kudalaba stoppage, which
Mm.
was probably the worst stoppage I've ever seen. This one was bad, but the Kudalaba and the Ankalaev stoppage, the worst one I've ever seen. So I agree, especially because if you're looking at not just underdogs that are live to win, Brady, but also what do their scores look like in a win? Well, Tavares, if he wins, pretty high chance it would be from a knockout. And some of the other fighters in the low end, even if they pull off an upset, I'm not confident they score as well as Tavares does in a win. So there aren't that many underdogs that I like. 3 of the ones that I'm targeting, Tavares is one. One of them is Sam Patterson, and that's really just because Lioness doesn't do anything. He doesn't have any kind of output, and Sam Patterson legitimately might win just by throwing 20 significant strikes around. If he doesn't get knocked out, that could be enough for him to win, but not somebody I really wanted to focus on here. The one I am going to talk about is Arnold Allen, and this is more of a bet on talent than anything else. I do like Evloev quite a bit, and I also have concerns about the output of Arnold Allen, but we haven't really seen Evloev striking tested too much. But I don't know if this is something that you've noticed, Brady, but in a lot of the times that we do see Evloev striking for extended periods of time, he does get chin checked a decent amount. And I do worry that one of these times he's going to fight elevated competition, because he hasn't fought the best level of competition. He ended up fighting Diego Lopez in his last fight, and Lopez ended up being much better than any of us expected him to possibly be in the outcome of that. But against a fighter like Arnold Allen, who does have power, we saw what he did to Dan Hooker in their matchup. And I think this could be a spot that we see Evloev get chin checked, because there have been a lot of times have been on Evloev, especially for DFS purposes, and he's fought lower levels of competition. And he puts up big scores, but there are always dicey moments in it where it's like, oh, he's close to getting subbed. He gets hurt on the feet and then lands a panic takedown and is able to recover. This is a big step up in competition for Evloev. I do think that he is the rightful favorite in the matchup, but I do have questions that are left unanswered about him, which does make me look at Arnold Allen on a slate that doesn't have a lot of underdogs I feel comfortable with, going to somebody who I know is at least talented on the low end, which is better than we could say about most of these cheap fighters.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, Evloev gets into trouble in pretty much every single fight. The Lopez fight, multiple occasions against Nick Lentz. Like, Nick Lentz, a judge actually scored the fight for Nick Lentz because Nick Lentz was putting Evloev into a bunch of bad spots. Mike Grundy had Evloev into in a very deep submission. And even Hakeem Dawodu had a lot of success in that 3rd round. So you're right. I mean, it's always iffy with Evloev. I do think it's a very winnable matchup for him, but you're right. We're getting a very, very, very talented fighter in Arnold Allen at this price tag on a card where I don't like a ton of underdogs. So I'm with you. I think Allen's definitely in play as a dog. Raquel Pennington, 100 more. I think she's in play as well. Co-main event. We don't want to get into it too much, but I think she's in play as well. So those are kind of what I'm looking at. Arnold Allen, Raquel Pennington, Tavares, and Patterson, and then Jimmy Flick, I think, are my top 5 there.
Yeah, one thing I'll add about Pennington, who I unfortunately posted a bet on in my Discord channel, but not because I feel like this is a great matchup to target or anything like that. It's really, I just don't think anybody should be significant favorite. I think this is close to a 50-50 fight. My fear for this matchup, Brady, is that Raquel Pennington watches the Buena Silva fight against Holly Holm and realize like, oh, there's a hole in Mara Buena Silva's game where you can just push her up against the cage and control her for really long stretches of time. There's a chance that Pennington wins this fight with like 15 minutes of cage control time, and it could be the worst title fight of all time. I don't really see a realistic way that this is a super entertaining fight. I think there's going to be a lot of clinching. And also Mara Buena Silva, she's just not a minute winner. If you look at her stats, she numerically gets outstruck. So she lands 4.16 significant strikes per minute. She absorbs 4.71. I think she's very talented, but she doesn't do anything. Like, she's a very good submission grappler who never shoots takedowns. So she has a lot of submissions on her resume, but it's primarily because she gets taken down and then she lands like an armbar from guard or something like that. So if I have to play one side of this for DFS purposes, it's going to be more on the Raquel Pennington side, but I don't really like this fight in general. It's one of the least appealing 5-round fights I think you could have for DFS.
Yeah, she's kind of frustrating. Like, she's an incredible grappler. Like, that's her best attribute. That grappling. She's so dangerous. Multiple submissions in the UFC. She doesn't shoot takedowns ever. I mean, Lena Landsberg was the only fight, and she had success. But other than that, she's not even attempting takedowns. So she's frustrating. She always seems to kind of find a way. But yeah, you're right. The minute winning, all on the Pennington side, and she's the dog here.
Yeah, only time that we've ever seen Buena Silva land a takedown. She landed 2 against Lena Landsberg and none against anybody else. And a lot of matchups where she probably would have had an easier path to success if she actually shot takedowns, but she never does. So Raquel Pennington, I'm unfortunately going to be higher on for DFS and have a bet on her, but not a 5-round fight that you guys have to be targeting. So thank you very much for watching. If you guys like the content, simply like the video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Stokastic.com. I made it through the entire video here, Brady, with no issues. And then I have to say subscribe on the way out, and I sound like an absolute dunce bag here. So subscribe to both of our YouTube channels. And if you guys like the content, let us know. If you have any other thoughts or opinions on other things we could do with it, I would love to hear it. So guys, good luck with UFC 297, and check out all the rest of the content that each of us are putting out for the rest of the week. Peace out.